You know what we're talking about. You saw the thumbnail. We're going to be talking about Gladiator 2. Fortunately, I got to see this movie 2 weeks early, so I'm very excited to be able to get my thoughts out about it early. But before we get into the review, if you haven't already, make sure to like and subscribe if you like these kind of videos, but let's get into the review. Gladiator 2 takes place 16 years after the events of Gladiator, in which the story follows Lucius, who witnessed the death of Maximus at the hands of his uncle. After the powerful emperors of Rome conquer his home, he has to enter the Colosseum and become a gladiator. With the future of the empire at stake, he looks to the past to find the strength and honor needed to return the glory of Rome to its people. This movie has a fantastic cast: Paul Mescal, Denzel Washington, and Pedro Pascal. Of course, along with Joseph Quinn and a ton of other great supporting cast. I was sort of back and forth on Gladiator 2 if we actually needed it, if it was actually going to be a good movie, and, I was still excited for the movie, as you saw in my top 10 most anticipated movies for the rest of the year, but I finally got to see it, and I have some thoughts about it. So Gladiator 2 tries its absolute hardest to bring back the charm and love from the first Gladiator film from 2000 that actually took home the award for Best Picture and Best Actor for Russell Crowe. So does Gladiator 2 do a good job at continuing this story? I am a little iffy on that. So my biggest problem with Gladiator 2 is that it kind of reminded me of Braveheart. And would a Braveheart 2 make sense, and would we want a Braveheart 2? The answer is no. And I think that's the same thing with Gladiator 2. I think that, for the most part, no one really wanted Gladiator 2. There wasn't a select group of people that have been waiting for 20 plus years for Gladiator 2, and that's exactly what this movie was marketing it as. It was marketing it as the sequel that people have been waiting for 20 plus years, which I think is completely falsified to have marketing for the movie. Gladiator 2 has a $310 million budget, which is around 3 times the amount of the budget of the first movie. So does that mean that Gladiator 2 is 3 times more as impactful as Gladiator? Absolutely not. Now, I'm not saying that Gladiator 2 is a bad movie by all means. I actually think it was still a fine movie. I think it was pretty okay. I don't think it was the greatest sequel out there. I actually think it might be on the lower side of sequels, in which we absolutely did not need this movie. And I really wish they had done something different with the story that actually had us wanting more. Now, Lucius's character, played by Paul Mescal, is a character from Gladiator. So they did actually have a character from Gladiator in which they made a story about. So it's not like they came up with a character and then inserted them into the first movie just to have a story for them. So yes, they did have a character story to give us more character. But why now? Did we really need a sequel based around that character? Because they do something very similar with Gladiator 2, in which the motivations for his character and wanting to reclaim Rome is pretty much the same exact motivation that Russell Crowe's character had, Maximus, in the first movie. People in his life die, and he's like, fuck, and then he goes on to kill a bunch of people and to reclaim his spot. But Gladiator did it so much better, and we actually felt the emotion from Maximus's character. And we could really connect ourselves to the idea of, honoring your family who was brutally murdered and is trying to reclaim justice. And Gladiator is an absolute masterpiece. And Gladiator 2 is not a bad movie, like I said. It was still pretty entertaining. I think on a technical aspect, it's beautifully shot. It has some really fabulous set design. I mean, with a $310 million budget, you should expect some really fantastical set designs and set pieces. But I really think this movie was really, first off, trying really hard to emulate Gladiator, but didn't do a fantastic job. I think the acting's pretty great. I think Denzel Washington is fantastic. I think Paul Mescal is fantastic. I'm not, super huge on the rest of the performances. I think a lot of them felt too overly serious and too overly goofy. I think their characters are meant to be goofy, but they kind of felt a little too goofy. And honestly, my biggest complaint, my absolute biggest complaint for this movie has to be that it's not that gory. I mean, yes, it's gorier than what you would see in a PG-13 movie. I mean, someone does get their head cut off, and there are slashes, there are, like some dismembering, but honestly, this was supposed to be this like just grungy movie, and it wasn't. It wasn't that, like, I mean, there was in the trailer they showed the how they were like bringing in sharks into the Coliseum, and the sharks do attack and the sharks do kill people as you would expect, but they just splash some blood into the water and be like, yep, there's your kill. There wasn't that like disgusting kill. And when it comes to the Gladiator movie, there was a lot of that in the first Gladiator movie. There was some nasty kills, and you really felt that horrific nature of the idea of the Colosseum and gladiators. You really felt that. I mean, there's one scene from Gladiator that I just remember so vividly, and it's the scene where I'm pretty sure there was a female gladiator, and on one of the chariots there is this like sword attached to the wheel, and it was spinning, and then they run into her and she just gets cut in half, and it's like shocking. There is none of that in this movie. There is I can't even think of one scene from Gladiator 2 in which I was just like, oh, like fuck, like no. I could not think of a scene that made me go, wow, holy crap, Paul Mescal is killing it. There is one scene near the end of the movie that I won't go into, but he says a line and I'm just like, oh, that was a good line. That was I wish there was more of that in this movie. That went hard, and it was really a cool line. I just wish there was more of that in the movie. I feel like I'm beating up the movie a little bit too much. Like I said, it was not a bad movie. It was entertaining. It was good. I think it was a little bit too long. Gladiator is actually 5 minutes longer, but I think the story was a lot more cohesive, and I cared more about the story and characters, so the runtime didn't feel that long, but this one definitely felt long. And I think the biggest complaint that I have, I think I already said that, but definitely one of the bigger complaints is, and it goes with the idea that we didn't need this sequel, but the way Gladiator ended, it ended not needing a sequel. I think the questions that it built up, if there were any questions, I don't remember having any questions after Gladiator, but I think the final shot of him in the wheat, of his hand brushing up against it, was very poetic and symbolic, and his death was very hard-hitting. And I'm very glad that they didn't bring back Russell Crowe or anything, which that would have been ridiculous, but I'm glad they didn't do something like that to disrespect the idea of how great Gladiator was. But Gladiator 2, I guess this could be a spoiler, but not. I mean, maybe, so just be careful with the next thing I'm about to say. But basically, Gladiator 2 ends with the potential of there being a third one. And apparently Ridley Scott is already developing a third one, and I don't like that. It's like Hollywoodified. It's just like, can we get a movie without having there have to be a sequel? Because Gladiator didn't need a sequel. It got a sequel. It's not bad. It's okay. It's, not the greatest thing. It's not like the, oh my gosh, Gladiator 2, like it's insane. No, but it's just unfortunate that, it ended feeling like it wasn't over, but also that it was. And it also ripped off, I guess it didn't rip it off because it's the sequel, but the ending was kind of super similar as far as the symbolic nature of it. It was very similar to Gladiator, and I was just like, oh, okay, cool. You just took the ending from Gladiator and just inserted it in here. So that means that this movie also has a great ending. No, that's not what it means. But I think that's one of the bigger issues, is that it feels Hollywoodified, and obviously it is. This is a money grab. I mean, it's like they knew how much people love Gladiator. Ridley Scott has just been making movies after movies after movies after movies the last 5 years, and not all of them have been good. I mean, I've heard some pretty poor things about a lot of the movies that he's been making recently. Napoleon with Joaquin Phoenix. But the thing about Gladiator 2 is that I don't think there's anything super memorable. People might find memorable things from this movie, but as far as I'm concerned, there isn't any particular moment in the movie except for that one line of dialogue that I was talking about earlier that I won't spoil what he says, but he says something that's pretty badass. That might be memorable. That actually might be something that is quoted down the line. But as far as making a movie memorable, Gladiator is definitely one of the most memorable movies in history. It's an epic, it's gruesome, it's incredible. The acting is astounding. The characters are amazing. It's not overstuffed with characters, which is this movie's issue too, is that there's a lot of characters in this movie to really follow throughout it. And it's very convoluted. Gladiator was not convoluted. Gladiator 2 is convoluted. So there's some disconnect there. But that'll do it for my review of Gladiator 2. Like I said, definitely not a bad movie. I'm looking at it in the way that it's just not that great of a sequel, but by itself, it's a fine movie. I wasn't impressed at all by, the gore or anything, or the characters. I think the way they sort of pushed the story forward, in which Paul Mescal loses his wife, which is in the trailer, so that's not really a spoiler, but that's the person that he loses, and it was kind of just like, I called it. Even though it was in the trailer, I was just watching the movie, and I was like, she's gonna get offed, and then he's gonna go off and try to get revenge on whoever, killed her, and it's just like, okay, this is Gladiator. And I didn't want to, yes, I wanted it to be like, this is Gladiator when seeing Gladiator 2, but I also wanted to be like, this is Gladiator, but different. This is awesome. I didn't get that from Gladiator 2. Not a horrible sequel. There definitely was a worse sequel that came out this year, Joker 2. But as a movie, I think that Gladiator 2 is fine, has great set pieces, fantastic cinematography. Ridley Scott obviously knows this Roman Empire world pretty well. I think he knew it more well with Gladiator. But Gladiator 2, I wouldn't say was a letdown. It was still a really, really nice movie to see in theaters. A little bit too long, a little bit too convoluted with its characters and story. But if you liked or loved Gladiator, I think you'll find appreciation in Gladiator 2, but I also think that you will find that it's definitely going to be a little bit of a disappointment as far as quality goes. But that is just what I think. Maybe you think this movie is an absolute masterpiece. Maybe it's just like Mad Max or Furiosa, a Mad Max story in which it's, a prequel that people didn't think that they needed, but it's a masterpiece. Maybe you'll think that about Gladiator 2, but it's just not how I felt. That'll bring us to the end of the video. Thank you so much for sticking around to the end of it. I appreciate every single one of you. And like I said before, if you haven't already, make sure to like and subscribe if you like these kind of videos. But that'll bring us to the end of the video. Thank you so much for sticking around. I appreciate every single one of you. And remember, your movie moment is right around the corner. See you in the next video.